Thanks for tuning in and subscribing to Cheating Stories Best. If you want to stay updated with the latest tales of infidelity and betrayal, you've come to the right place. Today, we have a story that hits close to home for many of you who might be grappling with similar experiences. Sit back and enjoy as we dive into this compelling narrative. John sat in silence as his wife Diana spoke, her voice wavering with emotion. "Do you understand what I'm saying?" she asked, her eyes searching his face for a sign of comprehension. John nodded, though his mind was a whirlwind of confusion and frustration. Over the past few days, he had found himself repeatedly saying "I understand," but each time, it felt more like a hollow, automatic response. The words had lost their meaning, and John was exhausted from their constant repetition. He couldn't help but reflect on how their relationship had reached this point. After over 22 years of marriage, John and Diana had built a life that many would envy. Their home, a beautiful old house that Diana had inherited from her grandmother, had been lovingly updated with modern amenities. The addition of a pool and a detached garage had transformed it into a showcase worthy of any HGTV episode. They also owned a charming beach house in Hades, North Carolina, a place John had deliberately kept unchanged, preserving it as a nostalgic sanctuary filled with cherished family memories. Professionally, both John and Diana were thriving. John Simon Thomas was a senior vice president at Central Logistics, reaping the rewards of years of dedication and hard work. Diana Anderson Thomas had also made a name for herself, working as a senior account manager at Richards & Son Securities for 2 decades. To the outside world, they seemed to have it all: an ideal home, successful careers, and what appeared to be a happy marriage. Yet, despite this seemingly perfect facade, John was grappling with an unsettling reality. Diana had been quiet, her silence punctuated only by the occasional, painful acknowledgement of their strained situation. He knew she was trying to communicate something significant, but he felt lost and unable to grasp the full scope of her feelings. Diana broke the silence, her voice firm and resolute. "It's time to end this debate. We've reached a point where we need to face the truth." John's heart sank as Diana's words sank in. She had been clear that she wanted to explore something outside their marriage. As she stopped speaking and glanced at him, John shook his head, unable to accept her decision. He looked her straight in the eyes and declared, "I will never cheat on you, and I cannot agree to you cheating on me." Diana's face hardened as she responded, "I never cheated on you." John's frustration bubbled up as he continued, "I'm willing to forgive you for the lies and deceit up to this point, but that's where it ends. I've been faithful to you." Diana retorted with a defiant tone, "You know I haven't been unfaithful. You're just making things up." John paused, his gaze piercing through her as he gathered his thoughts. "Let's be honest. Your actions suggest otherwise. You've had private lunches with someone, met him during bachelorette parties, and turned those encounters into dates. Your extensive texting, especially on weekends, raises questions." He glanced at the paper in front of him, where he had made 32 marks, each representing a time he had uttered the phrase "I understand" to her. His frustration was palpable as he added, "You've even booked an upscale room at the Jefferson Hotel and arranged a brunch for Sunday. Your intentions are clear." John's eyes then fell on the hidden dress and a Victoria's Secret bag tucked away in the back of her closet. "You've been preparing for something you want to keep secret from me. Your actions speak volumes." He paused, letting the weight of his words settle in the air. "I'm going to be straightforward now. The situation is unacceptable, and I need to make that clear." Diana remained silent, her gaze dropping to the floor, leaving John to grapple with the painful reality of their fractured relationship. "I'm going to make sure we're both on the same page about what's going to happen this Saturday morning. I'm offering you 2 options. First, I'll be heading to the beach house. I plan to stop at the Virginia Diner for breakfast before making my way to the shore. I'd like you to join me. We could spend the weekend there talking through our issues and considering whether our marriage is salvageable. It would also be nice if you returned the underwear you bought for him and picked out something for us to enjoy together." John paused, trying to gauge Diana's reaction. Once again, he found himself unable to read her, something that had never been an issue until recently. "Your second option is to stick with your original plans for Saturday. You could meet David Summers at the Jefferson Hotel, enjoy a romantic dinner at Bookbinders, dance at the Tobacco Company, and then return to the Jefferson to complete your evening. Look at me." Diana slowly raised her head to meet his gaze. "You can go ahead with your plans. You won't need my permission because the moment I leave on Saturday morning without you, our marriage will be over." Diana stared at John in shock. How did he know about their weekend plans? She opened her mouth to speak, but John cut her off. "In case you were wondering," John said, "I have friends where you work. They're concerned about you, and David Summers. He has no real friends at all." Diana was taken aback as John's words sank in. Trying to regain control of the situation, she attempted to counter his accusations. "I have been your faithful wife and partner for 22 years, she began. "No," John interrupted coldly, "you were a faithful wife for 21 years and 10 months. You've been cheating on me since your first lunch with David Summers." "I never cheated on you," Diana pleaded. "You already had an affair with him," John began to say, but Diana jumped in to interrupt. "I never cheated on you," she said, her voice trembling with a sadness that caught her off guard. John continued, his tone laden with bitterness. "I saw the betrayal in your eyes, eyes that used to be fixed on mine when we made love. Eyes that now look away and a face that turns from my gaze in bed. How many times were you with him while we were intimate? Our bed has been crowded for months now. I don't want to talk about it anymore. Do you understand?" Diana realized things were not going according to her plan. Desperate to regain the upper hand, she said, "John, we have a wonderful marriage. I value our relationship and your love more than anything in the world. We raised 2 wonderful children together and have promising careers. If we stay on course, we could retire early and truly enjoy life and each other. I've been faithful to you and am committed to being your loving wife until the end. I only need 1 day for myself and 1 night with him." John's response was swift and harsh. 1 day and 1 night. That's all you need? Diana's eyes fell to the floor, shaking her head in defeat. She glanced at John, feeling a pang of regret. "I could have gone behind your back, lied to you, but I chose to be open and honest. I thought after all these years, you would understand." John responded with a bitter edge in his voice. "I understand all right. And as for honesty, that's exactly what you've been lacking these past few months. You've gone on dates with him under the pretense of a bachelorette party. You've had intimate dinners with him, holding hands and letting him touch you in ways that only I should have access to. And worst of all, you've brought him into our bedroom, replacing me with him." John's voice was steady but filled with quiet resolve as he spoke to Diana. "You've allowed him to intrude on our lives, with hundreds of messages and intimate exchanges. Diana, I know everything. How I found out doesn't matter now. What's crucial is that you understand what I'm talking about. Do you?" Diana's gaze was distant, and John could see that she wasn't fully grasping the gravity of what she was throwing away. He sighed deeply, feeling a mix of sadness and frustration. Realizing that she didn't seem to comprehend the full extent of their situation, John decided he needed some space. He stood up, left the room, and headed to their bedroom. As he brushed his teeth and prepared for bed, he knew sleep would be elusive tonight. Meanwhile, Diana remained motionless for several minutes. Finally, she moved to the sofa, picked up her phone, and dialed her friend Janice. When Janice answered, Diana's voice was strained. "John knows everything. He knows about David and our plans for this weekend." Janice's response was immediate and concerned. "That doesn't sound good. Are you going to cancel everything?" Diana hesitated before answering, her voice soft. I don't know if I can. I promised David, and he's already spent so much money on this weekend. Janice's frustration was palpable. You've made promises to John before. If you don't remember, I remember, I was your bridesmaid. Summers can cancel everything without any cost to him. But that's no reason to cheat on John. I won't cheat on John, Diana said, her tone resolute but weary. Janice continued, when I talked about what George and I did, I made it clear that we had his permission and that we chose someone we'd never see again. We did everything by the book, yet we still have issues we're working through. You've decided to sleep with a colleague and are trying to justify it now. Please, just forget about this plan. Stop seeing David, and apologize to John. Diana's voice was soft, almost pleading. But I need this. I need to experience being with another man one last time. David is a nice guy, and the women at work say he's good in bed. A good guy wouldn't sleep with a married woman, Janice said firmly. Think about what you're risking just to become another notch on his bedpost. I won't be just another notch, Diana insisted. He's attentive to me. Janice was exasperated. Don't you see? This is even worse. I met David at our bachelorette party. He's a nice guy, but he's no John. You need to understand this. Diana whispered, I understand. Janice pleaded, please, take some time to think about your decision. This will affect everyone you love for the rest of your life. Diana responded quietly, I thought you'd understand. I thought you, more than anyone, would understand why I need to do this. Janice tried once more to reach her friend. Diana, the problem isn't that I don't understand. The issue isn't that John doesn't understand. The problem isn't even that your kids or your parents or your friends won't understand. The problem is that you don't understand. I beg you, don't do this, Janice implored. Diana's voice was firm. John knows what I've been doing, and he hasn't stopped me. He might not like it, but he'll let me do it. He'll understand how important this is to me. After ending the call, Janice turned to her husband George, feeling a deep sense of frustration. I tried to explain everything to Diana, but she didn't understand a word of it. I'm so sorry. Our situation, George replied, I thought we agreed this would remain strictly between us. Janice looked a bit puzzled. I needed to talk to someone about the issues we were facing. I never imagined it would lead to her having any ideas. George embraced Janice, his tone gentle. I understand, and I'm not upset. I must admit, I also spoke with John about our problems. Janice's head dropped in clear embarrassment. You told John? I can only imagine his reaction. Did he suggest just tossing me out or marking me with a scarlet letter? George shook his head, trying to reassure her. I thought you knew John better. He didn't react the way you're imagining. He asked me a series of questions about us. Answering them made me reflect deeply on our relationship. After I finished, he said, you two are in this together. You made these choices together. It's been a huge mistake, but you both have to correct it together. As long as you keep working on your relationship, everything will be fine. He made me realize that despite the mistakes, we were both in this together and needed to work on it as a team. That's likely why we're still married. Tears welled up in Janice's eyes. So, this might be why we're still together, but it could also be why John might end up divorced. George shook his head and hugged his wife tightly. Don't blame yourself if they end up breaking up. John's right, if they don't face this together, they have no chance. Meanwhile, Diana slipped into bed, noticing that John was already awake. He had turned his back to her, and they both drifted to opposite ends of the bed. Though physically only a couple of feet apart, the emotional distance felt like miles. They went through their morning routine in silence, not uttering a single word to each other. Once Diana left for work, John took a moment to relax and reviewed a list he had in his hands. It was Monday, and he had taken the day off from work. He moved through each room of the house, photographing everything and noting the items he wanted to keep. He catalogued each room's contents meticulously and copied all their wedding and family photos from the cloud to a flash drive. He left their wedding album on the coffee table, not daring to open it. Though he found the apartments he had looked at to be nice, John knew he would miss their house. He would hold on to the wonderful memories, but leaving this home would be a significant loss. He would miss the woman he still loved and the life they had built together. John then went to meet Sandra Lewis, who came highly recommended. The settlement she proposed was clear and straightforward. Diana would keep the house and the retirement plan. John would retain the beach house and the pension plan. He would also pay off Diana's car and all her credit cards. A portion of their investment accounts would be allocated for their children's college tuition, and $10,000 would be set aside for each child as an endowment fund. The remaining funds would be split 50-50. John reviewed the settlement offer and nodded in agreement. Sandra said they could submit the papers on Wednesday morning. He nodded again, stood up, shook her hand, and left the office. Sandra Lewis noted that her client had spoken very little to her since hiring her for the divorce. Most of their communication had been carried out via email or other written means. John sensed a deep sadness and resignation as he went through the motions of his day. He sometimes questioned why he had chosen family law as his specialty, given the personal toll it took on him. He started his day by heading to the bank. There, he opened a new account and transferred half of the funds from the old account into it. Next, he emailed the direct deposit change form to his company's HR department, planning to update his payment details later that evening. Afterward, he visited their investment banker, who confirmed that both his and Diana's signatures would be required for any future transactions. John informed him that his lawyer, Sandra Lewis, would be seizing the accounts the day after Diana was served with divorce papers. John was disheartened by the pitying looks and concerned expressions on the faces of his longtime advisors. He realized that these reactions would be common as the news of his divorce spread among their acquaintances. The thought of breaking the news to his children made him feel physically ill. Meanwhile, Diana was doing her best to avoid David Summers at work. Despite her efforts, they ended up at Maria's Cafe for lunch, a place David fondly referred to as their spot. Diana was unusually quiet, refusing to hold his hand. She couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, a sensation that had plagued her all day. David, oblivious to her discomfort, was focused on their weekend plans. "I'm really excited about this weekend," he said. "Hotel check-in is at 3 p.m. Do you think we could meet a bit earlier? Maybe we could enjoy some time in the room before dinner?" Diana's response was restrained. "I don't think so." Back at the office, Diana found it hard to concentrate. She kept glancing around, feeling that at least one, if not more, of her colleagues were keeping an eye on her for John. After a couple of unproductive hours, she decided to close up for the day. As she walked down the hallway, she greeted two new interns in her department. It wasn't until she saw the distinctive Central Logistics logo on one of their hoodies that she felt a pang of unease. John, having completed all his tasks by 2 p.m., realized he hadn't eaten all day. He decided to grab a snack at Maria's Cafe. When he walked in, the hostess greeted him with a warm hug. John embraced her tightly and asked about her son. Maria beamed as she shared the news. "He's doing great. He made the baseball team as a rookie and is so excited. James has been a fantastic training partner this winter. Your son has really made a difference." John smiled for the first time that day. "That's wonderful news. I'm glad to hear it." Maria sat down next to him and continued, "They were here for lunch again today, but all is not well in paradise. Diana was very nervous, and, of course, Summers didn't pick up on it. He may be clueless, but he's planning to sleep with her this weekend." John felt a wave of dejection wash over him. "Don't rush to judgment," he said quietly. "She must be a special woman if she's been married for so long. I just hope she realizes her mistake sooner rather than later. Maria nodded sympathetically. I hope so too. So, how about some Maryland crab cakes with broccoli? And maybe a beer for a change? I'll surprise you with one of our pale ales. John's mood lifted slightly. That sounds perfect. Later that evening, Diana returned home early and began to put her backup plan into action. She had decided to cook John's favorite dinner in hopes of softening his heart. It was crucial to her that he agree to let her have one last date with David. He hadn't agreed to it, and Diana needed him to at least acknowledge her actions. As the crab cakes baked, she went upstairs to change, wanting to look her best for him. Afterward, she planned to meet Janice and their friend Lisa for drinks to discuss the upcoming events one last time. On Saturday, she retrieved her Victoria's Secret clothing and bags from her closet and carefully placed them in the trunk of her car. She didn't want to embarrass either John or herself by revealing them prematurely. John arrived home at his usual time, surprised by the inviting aroma of dinner wafting through the house. Diana greeted him with a bottle of light beer. Please, take off your jacket and tie and have a seat. Dinner will be ready in a few minutes, she said with a forced cheerfulness. John smiled as he saw the crab cakes and steamed broccoli, his favorite dish. But as he took a seat, he couldn't shake the feeling that he'd rather be anywhere but home. The dinner proceeded in silence, and Diana, determined to make him understand, tried once more to explain her feelings. John, I love you, and I hope you understand why I needed to do this. John interrupted her, his voice flat and distant. I understand. You look very nice tonight. Are you going somewhere? Yes, Diana replied, trying to remain composed. I'm meeting Janice and Lisa for a few drinks later. But I'm trying to tell you. Yes, I understand, John cut her off coldly. You hope I understand. I really do understand. He pushed his chair away from the table, stood up, and said, I've lost my appetite. As he walked away, he added, you look really good for him. I guess you couldn't wait until tomorrow. When you see David Summers tonight, tell him to drop dead for me. John disappeared into the living room, and the hum of the television filled the silence of the dining room. Diana sat alone at the table, her head in her hands, grappling with the gravity of her choices. For the first time, she seriously reconsidered her actions. After a few minutes, she stood up and cleared the table. Hesitation was not an option, she needed to stay true to her feelings. She quickly texted Janice, can we meet earlier? I'm leaving in 5 minutes. John, meanwhile, drank his beer and stared at the TV, feeling the weight of his sadness press down on him like a heavy burden, making it hard to breathe. He reached into his coat pocket and took out a small box of sleeping pills. He swallowed 2 pills with the last of his beer. It was the first time in his life he'd taken sleeping pills, knowing he needed help to sleep and strength for Saturday morning. At the bar, Diana was the first to arrive and secured a table for 3. While waiting, she watched the lively scene around her. Men and women danced, their movements full of seduction, but to Diana, it all seemed like a display of despair and loneliness. Was this really her fate? Her thoughts were interrupted as Janice and Lisa arrived. They seemed tense, and Lisa wasted no time with pleasantries. What the hell do you think you're doing? Lisa asked bluntly. Are you out of your mind? Are you really planning to cheat on your husband with some lowlife from work? Are you going through menopause, or have you lost your mind completely? Pills, or did you hit your head? This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard, and I used to think you were one of the smartest people I know. If you go through with this, you must be the dumbest. Lisa's voice was sharp, laced with disbelief. Her anger and frustration were evident, and Diana could see the pain in her eyes. Diana simply responded, "Good evening to you too, Lisa. Yes, I'm fine. But what about you?" Lisa just stared at her, shaking her head. Diana turned to Janice. "Your turn," she said, bracing herself. Janice shook her head in frustration. You know how I feel about this whole adventure of yours. I'd say more, but I'm afraid I wouldn't be as polite as Lisa. Diana gave a sad smile. You think you could curse better than Lisa? Janice's expression remained stern. Well, no one can swear better than Lisa, but she left out some choice words like fallen woman, cheater, adulterer, and maybe the worst of all, disappointment. But there's one thing I need to tell you, I think you're about to make the biggest mistake of your life. I love you, and I'll be here to help you no matter what, but I have to say it. Lisa's frustration was palpable. Diana, what you're doing is wrong and incredibly stupid. But I'll be here for you too. Just so you know, I'll be saying I told you so over and over again. Diana embraced her friends. Thank you for your love. I know you can't support what I'm doing, but it's comforting to know that I can count on both of you. After the heartfelt exchange, Diana prepared to leave. You both know I don't do things halfway. I've made a commitment, and it's time to see it through to its natural conclusion. Lisa, her voice soft but firm, pleaded, Diana, there is nothing natural about betrayal. Commitment to betrayal is the exact opposite of what true commitment means. Diana sat silently for a few moments, absorbing her friend's words. Then she stood up. I need to finish my tasks for tomorrow. I'll bring a bottle of wine, please stay and drink it for me. She completed her preparations and drove back to her darkened house. Once inside, she collected her thoughts and sent Janice a lengthy text message, aware of her friend's anger but hopeful for her support. Realizing she couldn't leave her shopping in the car overnight because of the cold, she hid the items in the closet in the downstairs hallway. Then she slipped into bed next to John, though sleep eluded her. By 3 a.m., Diana gave up trying to sleep. She went downstairs and noticed their wedding album on the coffee table. If John could look at it, she thought, so could she. She flipped through a couple of pages before closing it and beginning to cry. She had to make him understand. At 5 a.m., having abandoned the idea of sleep, Diana took a shower. Afterward, she donned some Victoria's Secret lingerie, then selected a pretty outfit from her bag. She carried the suitcase she had packed earlier out to the car, placing the Victoria's Secret bag next to it. In the kitchen, she wrote a brief note to John. She couldn't help but chuckle at the irony of leaving him a Dear John letter. She left the note on the coffee maker, turned off the lights, and walked to the car, resolute in finishing what she had started. John woke up and glanced at the clock. It was 6:15 a.m. when John turned around. He was struck by the realization that he was alone. The thought hit him hard. Diana hadn't waited for this evening, as he had hoped. Instead, he imagined her in David Summers's bed, and the image cut him deeply. For the first time, John wondered if he had overestimated himself. Did he really push her away for a single night of testing another man? Had he jeopardized his chance at lasting happiness due to his own ego and pride? As he reflected on his predicament, John understood that if Diana went through with being with David Summers, he would never be able to love her again. He could accept that she prioritized her children, as any devoted mother should, but he could never reconcile with the idea of her placing another man above her husband. Over their 22 years together, they had built mutual respect and loyalty. She expected nothing less, and he would not accept anything less in return. Hoping she was home, John searched through all the bedrooms but found no trace of her. Desperate, he entered the kitchen and noticed a note on the coffee maker. He picked it up and read the brief message, "Please understand." John sank into one of the kitchen chairs, tears streaming down his face. Despite his fears, he had hoped she would stay, discard her reckless plans, and remain his wife. After brewing coffee, John went upstairs, showered, and dressed quickly. He packed a duffel bag with clothes and went back downstairs. He filled his thermos with coffee and headed toward the front door, casting one last, lingering look at the house that had been his home. He turned off the lights and closed the door behind him. The chill of the early morning air was sharp against his face as he walked down the steps. He had forgotten to start the car, but he figured the cold might help clear his mind. As he approached his car, he realized the engine was already running. He opened the back door to put his bag inside and was startled to find a suitcase and a Victoria's Secret bag in the back seat. To his astonishment, Diana was asleep in the passenger seat. He gently closed the back door and reached for the front door handle, overwhelmed by tears of relief and joy. Seeing her there gave him renewed hope that they still had a chance. John took a deep breath and opened the car door. Diana stirred and looked at him sleepily. "Good morning," she whispered, rubbing her eyes. "Morning," John replied, a bit unsure. After a brief pause, he asked, "How long have you been here?" Diana checked her watch and said, "About 2 hours. I couldn't sleep, and I was worried you'd leave without me, so I decided to wait in the car. I filled up the tank and bought us a dozen Krispy Kreme donuts for the road." John opened the box of donuts and noticed there were only 7 left. "There are only 7 donuts here." Diana, now fully awake, replied with a smile, "There were a dozen when we started. I ate my share already." John smiled as he took a donut and let it melt in his mouth. "This will hold me over until we have breakfast at Virginia's diner. How do you feel about their country ham and cookies and cream donuts?" Diana shook her head playfully. "I'm not dressed for Virginia's diner." John looked puzzled. "Diana, there's no dress code at Virginia's. You can wear whatever you want." Diana smiled mischievously and opened her coat to reveal a purple lingerie set underneath. "I know. You can wear almost anything there, but I'm not exactly dressed for it." John's eyes widened with a mix of surprise and amusement. "Well, that's definitely not almost anything," he agreed, taking in the sight. "Is the coat new?" Diana responded, "Yes, I swapped out my dress for this stunning coat. And in case you didn't notice the Victoria's Secret bag, I returned those other lingerie items and bought these specifically for you." She placed her hand gently under his chin, lifting his face to meet her eyes. "This outfit and the body beneath it are meant solely for your eyes, for all the days and nights of our lives." After a brief pause, she continued, "I'm deeply sorry for the turmoil I've caused you these past months. You were right about almost everything. There were only 2 things you were wrong about. First, last night, I dressed up for you and no one else. I also met with Janice and Lisa. The second thing is, when we had our night together, I was intimate with David, but he never came into our bedroom. I didn't close my eyes to think about him, but I couldn't look you in the eyes because I was so ashamed of what I wanted to do. I'm ashamed to admit that despite the shame, I still planned to be with him." She looked at him with sincerity. "Now I truly understand." Her words hung in the air, heavy with regret and revelation. John kissed her tenderly. There was much to discuss and even more to work through to mend their marriage, but his heart soared with joy knowing she finally understood the depth of their issues. As John drove past the Virginia diner, he glanced over at Diana, who had fallen asleep again. Once they reached the highway, he found his mind wandering back to the events of the previous Friday. He knew they had much to talk about, and he was certain that any honest conversation would require him to confess his own mistakes. John's thoughts drifted back 7 years to a pivotal moment in his career. He had been in San Francisco for a quarterly corporate meeting, serving as the head of his department. His visionary approach had yielded impressive results for the company. While foreign companies were acquiring American competitors, John saw an opportunity in buying an Italian company. This company, despite its financial difficulties, had brilliant engineers. His mentor, the CEO, approved the acquisition, which turned out to be a monumental success. The purchase not only brought in skilled engineering teams but also provided the company with valuable access to the European and Chinese markets. The deal generated billions of dollars and was a crowning achievement of the CEO's career. It also catapulted John onto a fast track in his corporate career. That evening, Diana was home in Virginia with their children, attending a school band concert. John celebrated his success with his colleagues and, notably, with Debbie Maries, a marketing representative from another division. Debbie and John had maintained a long-term, friendly business relationship. He drank just enough to loosen his inhibitions but not enough to lose control. As the evening progressed, their friendly relationship took a more intimate turn. They danced closely, much closer than a married man should with someone other than his wife. When they eventually headed to her room, John's mind occasionally wandered back to his wife and their wonderful family at home. Yet, in the presence of the beautiful Debbie, he found it difficult to focus on anything but the moment at hand. Maurice found himself paralyzed outside the door, unable to muster a single reason to step inside. After taking a few hesitant steps back, he made a split-second decision and literally ran back to the elevator. Once in his room, he took a shower, desperate to wash away the lingering scent of Debbie. It was 1 a.m. in their Richmond home, but Maurice felt compelled to call Diana. He needed to hear her voice. After several rings, Diana answered sleepily. Maurice reassured her that he was fine and nothing bad had happened. Then, with a shaky voice, he shared the good news. His adventure had been a success, and he had received a significant promotion with a substantial salary increase. As Diana excitedly expressed her pride in him and how she had always believed in his success, Maurice found himself in tears. Through his sobs, he realized that he had nearly shared one of the greatest moments of his life with the wrong woman. Diana's opinion and happiness were what mattered most to him. The realization hit hard. He had been on the verge of making a huge mistake. On his drive to the beach, Maurice was resolute. He had to tell Diana everything, to make her understand why he truly grasped her feelings. He was walking in her shoes now, and he needed to be honest and sincere in his understanding. Meanwhile, David Summers was alone in Fred Davis's office at Richards & Sons. Fred, the vice president of human resources, had summoned David early that Monday morning. David was bewildered about why he was there. True, he had recently missed a few deadlines due to his involvement with Diana, but he was confident he could quickly make up for it. The meeting disrupted his plans for the day. He needed to discuss the events of the weekend with Diana. Not only had she set him up, but she had also sent two of her friends, Janice and Lisa, to confront him. David recalled his fear of Lisa. She had been a force to reckon with. Despite his father's long service in the Navy, Lisa's ability to deliver a scolding had left him feeling utterly humiliated. Even the hotel security seemed reluctant to intervene during their confrontation at the Jefferson Hotel. As David turned to take his seat, he froze when he noticed a photograph on Fred Davis's desk. It was a family portrait showing Fred, his 3 sons, and his smiling wife. David's eyes widened in recognition. Lisa was Fred's wife. The realization hit him like a ton of bricks. Now he understood the gravity of why he was summoned. What would you do in David's situation? Would you handle it the same way he did? Share your thoughts in the comments below. See you in the next video.